Welcome to the Moxie Press Podcast. Today we have a conversation with E.J. Ginger, our October author spotlight. She wrote a wonderfully subtle but filled with creepy and dread dystopian piece. You'll hear her read it. It's actually very relevant. You'll hear in our conversation that this is a person who aligns 300% with everything that Moxie Press believes and stands for. And we have a very productive conversation about women's health, the state of the world, and the idea of just going for it and writing and seeing what comes of it. Please sign up for the newsletter so that you can read these author spotlights and more. You can also find them on our website and follow us on social to see more clips from podcasts and get to know us a little better if you haven't already. But if you have, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for being a fan. And I hope you enjoy this conversation.
The cot is uncomfortable and cold. The thin paper covering sticks to my skin, crinkling with my every move. How long have I been waiting in this exam room? I pass time by tracing the goosebumps on my arms. Connect the dots. Like I taught Felicity. Like I would have taught Jude. No. Think of something different. I read the posters on the walls. One depicts the stages of life of an unborn baby. Brain activity after 5 weeks. Heartbeat at 6. And so on all the way to the first breath after delivery. Judith didn't make it much further than that. If only my husband were here, Malachi wouldn't have been much comfort, but he would have held my hand, shared in this silent grief. He spent hours on the phone last week with our health insurance and Dr. Green's office for an exception to be made for me to attend alone. I've never been to any appointment alone. It was difficult, but I got approval. Dr. Green is one of the best prenatal and pregnancy specialists in the state. It's a privilege to be seen by him. He'll fix everything. The door opens with no preceding knock, and Dr. Green walks in. He's tall, his face creased with stress. In his hand is a manila folder. He shuts the door, never looking up from the folder. The corners of his eyes crinkle as he reads. Wrinkles appear on his forehead. Suddenly his face clears, and he looks up. "Good morning," he says to the empty chair across the room. He frowns. The wrinkles reappear as he turns to me. "Just you?" "Yes, sir." His expression doesn't change. I tap my fingers on the cot. "This was an emergency appointment? My husband couldn't get off work." His stare is cold and dark under heavy brows. The paper covering rips under my sweaty hand as I fidget. "No other male family?" My voice has stopped working, words glued to my tongue. Taking my silence as an answer, he flips through the folder, humming to himself. "All right, Missy. I see here you've delivered twice. Both daughters." He doesn't look at me for confirmation. The paper covering crinkles as I shift, hunching my shoulders. He sighs and turns to the next page. "Your eldest at 12, but I see here you began menstruating at 10. A bit early, but still." He catches my eyes. I hate this part. "I struggled to conceive for a while after my marriage." "Mm-hmm." Can he tell I'm lying? Our families couldn't, but maybe he can see through our deception. I can't tell him that Malachi was concerned I wouldn't be able to safely give birth so young. Dr. Green doesn't look at me, but nods along to my words. "You know women are required to deliver at least one child of each gender. You have yet to give birth to a boy." "I know." He grins. "Daughters are wonderful, but those babies can't have babies by themselves. We need boys to help bring about the next generation. Children are our future. I know the law, sir. When he doesn't speak, I continue. My last was an emergency delivery. Only 28 weeks. She didn't make it. This appointment was made because of concerns about my ability to carry any more children to term. Nonsense. We have plenty of resources to make sure every baby survives. Your most recent was just one of the unlucky few. I'll give you a pamphlet on how to improve your health so this doesn't happen again, and prescribe you a daily vitamin. His face grows stern. Be thankful her death wasn't your fault. You already delivered her, so it was in the doctor's hands to ensure her survival. He's the one that will be facing charges, not you. He flips through my chart again. You've only been having intercourse twice a week? I flinch at his hard tone. Twice weekly is the minimum as mandated by the state. The minimum is generally disapproved of. My husband's job takes him away for days at a time. Sometimes the minimum is all. I will contact his employer. Anything else? Tears sting in my eyes. I look at my lap, twist my fingers together. Since Judith. Who? I squeeze my eyes shut. My last daughter. She died. I pause. Swallow the pain. Passed in the NICU? Oh yes, the poor dear. She would have been a great mother. A beat of silence passes. Since her death, the grief, my husband hasn't wanted. It's bold, blaming Malachi, but it's the truth. Judith's death hit hard for him. He had been anxious the entire pregnancy. My first was rough, and Felicity had been premature. She was healthy, if a little small and delicate. Judith wasn't so lucky. Nonsense, the doctor says again. I can't remember hating a word more. You need to make yourself more available to him. Anything else he says washes over me. I hug myself, hands resting on my stomach. Be a boy next. Please be a boy. Malachi is home when I return. I wasn't expecting you until morning. He greets me at the door with a long hug that I melt into. The doctor called my boss. I got sent home early. He pulls back and brushes his knuckles against my cheek. I lean into his touch. Countless times I have thanked every deity I knew that I was married to this man. Someone kind enough to open himself up to friendship with me, if not love. Are you all right? He deflates as I tell him everything. I thought so. There's sorrow in the lines by his mouth, downturned into a miserable frown. Worse is the heaviness in his eyes, the grief and resignation I see under his furrowed brows. My mom has Felicity. He nods and kisses my forehead. Come, he whispers, and leads me down the hall to our bedroom. Please, a boy. A happy, healthy boy.
That was our October author spotlight, EJ Ginger, with her short story, Our Future. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having
EJ.
me. I was really excited about this.
Yeah, same here. One of the things, when you get into the later part of the year, there's always this like weird, not obligation, but you tend to feel like things are themed a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we noticed that a lot of the, I think people just naturally, when they were submitting work for October, were like horror, spooky.
Mm-hmm.
But your piece kind of nicely like toes that line, and it actually really engaged us. At first you wouldn't think that this is anything more than like an anecdote or like just a recounting of experience in a doctor's office for a woman, which in the modern age for itself,
Yeah.
very complicated and can be a compelling thing. But and then the moment that the doctor mentions like requirements for,
Mhm.
you're supposed to have one kid, of each gender, it kind of takes on this like sort of eerie, soft sci-fi vibe for the rest of it. And I thought, it just kind of grabbed us, and we're like, oh, okay, like what is this? So it's funny that like it already had, and then it took on that sort of like otherworldly theme a little bit, toward it. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I guess we are staying within like a October-y kind of vibe. But very different, much more realistic. But before we get into all of that, I would love for you not only to tell me, but also our listeners, and since this will be on YouTube, our viewers, kind of what got you started as a writer, your journey from, first word on the page to now.
I've been writing little songs, stories, and everything since I was like a tiny child, making up things. My family, we were like surrounded by art, literature, music, what have you. And so when I started, making up these stories and songs, and I was heavily encouraged. And I always found a lot of joy in telling stories and making things up. I remember being like 11 years old, sitting in my twin bed at home, scribbling in a notebook. And so it's just been about 20 odd years of me making things up and writing them down. A lot that will never see the light of day, but still there.
I mean, that's how it usually goes. There's so many things I've written. I'll be like, this is not meant for human consumption, but it helps get all of those out, the wiggles out, as it were. That's funny. I feel like as someone who also loves to write and tries to write often, there are like two stories. Like there's yours where like you're surrounded by art. You're you grew up in that environment. It's very encouraged. I came from like a very repressed, like Catholic family. So I think I just had all this pent up, like I need to get it out somehow. So in my room at night, I would be, writing stuff or making stories up and whatnot, because I had no better outlet. And I wasn't like a very physical kid. So I wasn't going to go out and take care of my energy that way. But we have 3 kids. So we're hoping to foster more of the surround them with art environment. We're not in my office right now, but we have like a first folio of Shakespeare in there, a bunch of plays and a bunch of fiction and nonfiction on the walls. A lot of music. When you sat down to write Our Future, obviously it's not just prescient, or hopefully it's not too prescient, but it's not just relevant, but what was your inspiration, I guess, in general for this piece?
Oh gosh. Don't let me rant. So
No, please. No one wants to hear me speak too much. They're like, let the guests do stuff. So I won't leave you out hanging out to dry though, I promise.
We'll get angry and political, I promise.
Great. No, please, that's what we want.
Oh, I have notes. My friends have notes. So Roe v. Wade got overturned back in 2022. And I was livid. And so that was the essentially the birth of Our Future was right there. Like the minute they overturned it, and that anger and frustration came up of how dare they, honestly. Because from personal experience, I would want that option still. Indiana is one of the many states that will not have abortion rights on the ballot for this election. And so if I was able to get pregnant at this point, I would want that option. But we have a full ban here. So I was really mad. And I sat down and started writing like the scene in the doctor's office. And at first the narrator was exceptionally young. And she still is a lot younger than And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go full extreme with this. Full dystopian, 1984, and no pulled punches. And I wrote a huge chunk of it and then put it down. Because I really have an issue with completing things. And life got in the way. And so it was back in, I think it was July. My older brother sent me one of your TikTok videos asking for submissions, I think, for like September. Nice. And I'm like, do I have a story for them? Because I went through like what you were looking for, or went through your videos to see like what you were looking for in your views and stuff. I'm like, oh, this kind of fits. Yeah, they might like this. Here you go. But it took me a while to get it done and finished. And I cut a lot out. It was close to like 3,000 words. But I've had all three of my children. Only one made it to not a safe delivery, but survived after he was delivered. The other two were stillborn. Mm-hmm. And the one that survived only lived for 5 days. And so it was a very, like, it felt like a very personal attack when they overturned that. And then when all the trigger laws across the country and everything. So it was really just a lot of anger and frustration from me at the world. I wrote it more as a criticism towards, the modern political trends about women's autonomy and abortion rights.
That's, for one, I'm so sorry for what you've had to go through. Yeah, I know when that happened, obviously I have a different perspective as a man on the issue. Not, it's the same. We all agree. I just mean that I didn't, my wife was ready to throw, her computer across the room. And I just felt this sense of shame. I think, a lot of people just felt at the time, not just the minute, but the, or the words I'm trying to find, the fact that the Supreme Court was was what it was because of Donald Trump. And you feel that because white men are in power, I'm I feel partially responsible. I don't know why. But yeah, that's the way that from a literary standpoint, you address it is interesting. Only not just in that, obviously it's personal and it feels personal. And I think that really spoke to us. But there's still this sense of it wasn't, and we've had submissions like this where it was just a full on rant, it was something more, less, not refined. That's not a great word, but less packaged in a story that felt communicative. Right. You mentioned that, the original iteration, the girl was far, far younger, unreasonably young. I think, just the choice to make it, while still young, a more typical age, for giving birth, being married whatever, like, I think just helps it even more, because that is like, this is not just an issue that young girls are going to face. This is an issue that all women will face, and most likely, you know, women in the Midwest in their, you know, late teens, 20s, who, you know, get married soon after college or anything like that. Like, I think a lot more people will see this and identify on a lot like broader scale. It makes it more terrifying, frankly, when your protagonist is someone that more people can identify with, because you're like, oh no, like, this could happen to literally anyone. This is not just for a special sect of people.
Yeah, especially
one of the things that also
be relatable about
please.
that is to like, she was not named. Like,
Correct.
at all.
Yes.
Yes. It was first person, no name. She was the only one to mention her daughters by name, even if in her own head. And so I found that, like, that was a very intentional aspect of it. That, you know, this is just some random woman trying to get healthcare, trying to, you know, get something solved in this dystopian little world. And everybody can relate to that, because we've all had healthcare issues for covering something at some point.
Right. Yeah, no. And one of the things too, to piggyback off of that point is, well, one, it took me a second the first time I read it, because like, she says Judith, and then the doctor goes, who? And I'm like, you don't know? But I'm like, of course they wouldn't know. Like, they don't care. One of the things that I think you like, I mean, you nailed a lot, but one of the things that spoke to me, you know, when my wife was going through her pregnancies, I was very dumb and ignorant to women's health care. Like, I'm like, well, I don't know. You go to the doctor. They don't.
Yeah.
I little, like, honestly, little did I know at the time that, like, not just doctors, but like scientists, people who are supposed to be researching, they know so little about the female body, period. Not just pregnancy, through other key moments like period, like menopause. Like, there's so much that people are, and whenever I tried to research it after, I'd look it up, and the explanation was like, I don't know, it's not a priority. Like, there was no good reason. Like, you can study a body. Like, there's no, it's biology. Like, it's pretty straightforward if you are a biologist, if you are a scientist trying to figure this out. And one of the things that like really came to light was the way that doctors speak to women, like, versus men, even in this day. And I thought that was one aspect that really, really spoke to me personally, was your doctor character being like, so kind of removed, and like little things like the word nonsense. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I get it. Like, a lot of people who are just kind of removed from a situation, like, he is a doctor, like, he does not feel her pain. He is supposed to be impartial. Still say like little insensitive things that they think mean nothing. Yeah. But it's like, this isn't nonsense, dude. Like, this is like
this is an issue.
This was my child. Yeah, this is like, this is my world. And you're just like, oh, don't worry about it. Or the line where he's like, you're lucky it's not your fault. I'm like, it wouldn't have been her fault anyway. Like, I don't, like, why is that comforting? But it was so accurate to like the strange, like, cops and doctors all have that, like, if a doctor could put on big sunglasses and just not even have to look at you in the eyes, like, they would. Oh, yeah. Like, that is so like specific way of like talking to people. And I think I appreciated that, not just because it was accurate, but I think that was one of the things that like a male reader will start to pick up on. Like, you know, we see it with like our own healthcare, not to that extreme, but it's just like, sometimes doctors suck in general at talking to patients. And it's like,
it's because they have to have that barrier, that professional barrier. Because like, I work in healthcare. I'm a CNA. And if you don't have that, even a partial, you know, professional barrier, you get very emotionally attached. Like, I work in a nursing home, and I'm very emotionally attached to most of my residents. And so you have to have some kind of professional barrier. Otherwise, you can't really do your job very well. You get too concerned about things and all the little emotions, and you just can't do it. Because you're like, oh no, this could have an adverse reaction. I don't want that to happen to them. And everything. But it gets to where it eventually reaches a point where it's too much. It's too unfeeling and professional, and you have to have some kind of sympathy. And you have to, like, personability.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine, and I don't know if you intended this or thought about this outside of the story, but I also imagine, I guess, to the doctor's credit, like maybe he's just been through it so much that it's like, I can't witness more of this and feel anything anymore type thing too. But you're right. I know it gets to a point where it's like there is a line and you have to find the balance. And, my brother-in-law is a doctor, and I think he doesn't work in like convalescence or like in a nursing home. He does work with older patients, and he'll talk often about how he's to the point where it's like so grating to have to, diagnose the same things over and over. Like it just becomes like this
routine.
Pattern. Like it just yeah. And of course, like he's just like internal meant like for elderly, like so he doesn't have to deal with like the sad or emotional parts. So he's literally just dealing with like the annoying parts. Like your knees hurt because you're old. I don't know what you want me to tell you. Here's some medication. Like that constantly. And he's like, but after a while, like you just stop, like you're just kind of a robot. And like this is a lesser extreme, but he's still just like, I can't, my brain cannot fathom even processing it anymore. I just have to like go through the motions and just make sure I don't mess up something truly important with like their medication or their care. But like in everything else, he's like,
you have those days and times where you're just like, okay, nope, we're not doing it. We're just going to go through the routine and be done.
Right.
And I didn't think about it when I was writing Dr. Green from that perspective. I just wrote I think I was just really angry when I created his character. And was like, this is just another government pawn. We don't like him. He's rude and mean. And he doesn't care either.
Cool, he's a jerk. Right.
My sister-in-law read, and she called me on FaceTime, and she went, I hate that doctor. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him.
It feels too real. I mean, that's part of the thing. There are people like, I'm sure any woman who reads it, he's like, oh, this fucking guy again. Like,
this guy.
Dealt with this dude. Like, well, I guess I'll go back to this real quick, just because like another thing too is that you mentioned that you work in nursing home, and my dad worked in a convalescent home. He was a nurse for his career. And he encountered a lot of like the same issues that I think like you're talking about, where it's like, it's hard to like, it was convalescent. Like, so, he dealt with like a lot of issues with, just gross stuff, basically. I'm sure you do as well, but he also had to like deal with like the personal aspect. And I thought that was always, this kind of brought me back to that too, especially having to visit. One of the things that also stood out, and I think anyone would stand out because we don't get enough of these, and something I love personally, is that the story is written in the present tense.
Yes.
I mean, what was the inspiration for that? Because it's a choice.
It was a choice. It wasn't a conscious choice, though. I think I just started writing, and it came out in first person present tense. And okay. And usually when I start writing something and I just BS my way through the beginning of it, the tenses will just kind of go all over the place. But it stayed present tense, like, the whole way through. And I went, okay, nice. So... And I think that had I written it in past tense, I don't think it would have had as much of an impact. I think they would have
Right.
been... Yeah, it would have just been like, oh, this is another, like, a fiction, and, you know, somebody just going make-believe. Like, most fantasies written in past tense.
Right. Well, because that makes it something that happened, as opposed to something that's happening, that happens now.
Right.
Rather.
There we go. That's a better way to put
it. No. You put it perfectly, because like it is true. Like a lot of fantasy, a lot of like just lore, like folklore heavy stuff, like is very much like in the days of blah blah. Like it's very much a past tense idea, because you're, even when it's fiction, the idea is to teach you an exciting history of something.
Right.
Whereas this is like, we're living through history right now. Like, please do it. One of the reasons I bring it up is that I strive to write in that tense, and every time I do it, I'm like, oh, I can't pull it off, so I change it to past tense. Like I always have to go back. But I just thought it was, you brought up you didn't do it subconsciously, and I think you brought that up earlier too, like with the doctor character, you just kind of went all in. With our last Doctor Spotlight, I had a similar conversation, which is like, after a while, especially if you've been doing it as long as you have, or as long as like they have and stuff, like as long as I have, there are certain things you stop thinking about, and it just kind of happens, which is nice. And I think that's a good part of this podcast, is for aspiring writers to, listen to people who are also indie writers. We're not, talking to uber successful millionaire writers, because what would be the point? Like they've, the formulas, and like people
coming on and hanging out.
Yeah. And also, like, it's just not like a realistic standard for writing. Like the people who are best to talk about are people who are impassioned and doing it daily, and are doing it mostly for the love of it, but hopefully to gain something a little more. And I think it's like a good lesson to just kind of trust your instincts. In this case, both instincts were like, I'm just going to do this doctor character, and he's just going to be like my vessel for everything that I'm frustrated with when it comes to like how doctors handle, women's healthcare, or the present tense. Like, you don't question it. It just turned out that way, and it ended up working. Once you do it enough, it just kind of happens.
Where I'll go back and be like, hang on, I forgot what color his shirt was. And I'll read something, and I'll be like, that was good foreshadowing. And you're just like unintentionally putting things in, and you realize, oh, hey, good job, Muse.
That's like the best gift too.
It is. When you go back and realize you unintentionally put something in that works out really well, or can become even better. And you just gotta trust the process, honestly. And just get it done.
To me, it's also an indication, like the more that happens, the more you find yourself in that flow where things are answering, like their questions are answering themselves, etc. That just means like you're on the right path. Like, that means like your brain is like in support of you and wants you to do this and finish it.
It's less of the, I forgot what the word is, imposter syndrome. You get less of the imposter syndrome when you go through and you're like, oh, so I do know what I'm doing, at least a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I had that like last night, because I was trying to. I'm sorry, I sound sick because I am sick. I apologize. It's just a head cold. Unfortunately, I can still work and do other things. I don't have the excuse I can't just sit in bed. I even had that last night, like a short little like 400 word something for like a bio for a thing I was signing up for. And I turned it into a story. And then by the end of it, I was like, oh, maybe I do know what I'm doing. Because sometimes I'm sure you feel the same way. We just don't. I think a lot of.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that any level of writer, even like maybe not like a James Patterson, but like there are certain writers out there like who just probably feel, even to this day, they have like 10 novels out and they still feel like an imposter. But like you said, trust the process.
Put it out, like so many works in such short time. Like on Book Talk, they have all these books coming out, and I'm like, yo, it took me 2 years to write 1,000 words.
I think some people, it's well, like that just, not to bring them up again, but I think that is a good point. Like some people it takes a while. The previous author spotlight, I forget the number. It was like some insane amount of like 19 books in like X amount of years because some people are just like, some people have like the Ira Glass thing where they're like, I just have to keep writing. And
Yeah.
you just write and write and write and write. And like what comes of it comes of it. And people are like, this is like a very meditative process. I
Yeah.
can't just like sit down and churn out a book in, 3 months or something. Like this has to be something that like sits with you and whatnot. But it's different for everybody. I think whatever works for you. Something that we ask all of our author spotlights is because we have an audience and we have a focus on like indie writers specifically, people who are just out there doing the thing either for the love of it, or they're trying to publish on KDP or something and like make some money. Do you have any advice for those writers just grinding it out?
Really, just if you want to write, like pen, paper, keyboard, and computer, just do it. Even if you don't have an idea, just start typing random things. You might come up with something. Who knows? Like my sister-in-law found a story idea she had written like ages ago, and recently like reread the little outline she had, and she went, I'm gonna write this, and like consistently every day has sat down for an undetermined amount of time and just written, and she's got like over half of it written already. And
Nice.
yeah, in like a month, 2 months. So if you just like, if you have the idea, sit down, make notes on it, write it out, just do it. Just go for it.
I mean, that's wonderful advice. I know like one of the things that I think people struggle with is not just like sitting down and doing it, which is, it can be daunting. I think if people actually like sat down and forced themselves, they'll realize after a certain point, you just kind of get over that,
Yeah.
like sense of dread about writing. But the other thing is that like, it is important to just get it out. Like we have a book in our catalog called Just Write Your Damn Book Already. And it's like a framework for writing a novel. And the whole point is just that, where it's like, we want you to research, we want you to come up with themes. At the end of the day, though, like there's a 30-day writing challenge where it's like knock out your first draft as quickly as possible because it's going to suck. And it's like once you get through that, and like a lot of people call it this, but like in it, we specifically call it the vomit draft because like it's just supposed to like you have all this and then all this inside of you, and then you just then you spew it out into the page. But that is part of it. It's like if you don't get to that point and just like sit down and do it, you're not going to get to the point where you realize, oh, you might be good at this, or this might be something that you enjoy. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't publish anything that we don't love ourselves as writers, and you have to find that point and on your own. And I mean, I know sometimes I'll be very structured. Sometimes I'll just go for it and just see like what comes out. And I'm like, I don't know what we're doing. I have like a word. I'll start with a word. Just go from there. Yeah. And exactly. Anything. Yeah. I'm like, the what? Okay.
I think it was a really good point you made where like you have to be okay with what you publish. And I think the only person a writer needs to please with their writing is themselves. Like you don't think about it like you're writing for an audience. Like if this is something one needs to feel like it needs to be written, just write it for yourself. Like write the story you want to read, and even if you don't publish it, you can go back and go, this is really good.
Exactly. Well, that's been, and my wife's same way. We both come from theater, specifically like Los Angeles theater. And one of the things that I used to tell people, because I used to direct a little bit and write and work as like an actor, like in a company. And one of the things my standard was always like, I don't know, are you satisfied with like your work? Would you pay $200 to watch yourself on Broadway? And if the
Right.
answer was like no, I'd be like, then why are we doing it this way? Like, why, like, if you're not willing to shell out something serious to witness this because
Mm-hmm.
you want to see it so badly or you love it so much, like, you cannot expect anyone else to. And I think in writing and theater and film and any sort of artistic medium,
Yeah.
if creators are not asking themselves that question, then we get, I'm trying to come up with an answer that won't not offend somebody, but won't get me in trouble. We won't get like certain Marvel movies. We will keep getting certain things out there.
Certain Marvel
Transformers 10 and stuff. Like, not that they're
remakes
bad. I
upon
used to love them.
remakes.
I'm sorry.
Remakes upon remakes, and
Exactly, and it's like we should be asking ourselves this more and more often. We're just like another, not that these are bad, but there are often a lot of them that are bad. Another romance book on KDP. Like, people need to start holding themselves to a standard, especially since the field is so democratized now. We're not having to go through gatekeepers and publishers just to get seen. We can just be seen.
Just get online and put it out there. Like, it's very easy to just get a blog and be like, hey, this is my stuff.
Yeah. And so it's like, now we need to, you, me, everyone need to be our own gatekeepers in that way. And the best way to do it is by being like, so I just think that spurred that whole thing for me, because, like, the way you do that is by what you said, sitting down and just doing it. You don't learn until you do. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. One of the things I think with our future, just kind of wrap it up on that story, is that it's almost an eerie sense of romance. Like, it's hard to like put a finger on it. Again, it's one of those things that feels realistic at the end. It's not romantic, but it does feel like, tell me if I'm reading it wrong, because I had an English teacher in high school that said that there is an answer to everything, and the author knows what the answer is, even if they haven't really talked to themselves about it. If they think about it, they know the answer. I like to think that Malachi does care, that he is a good person in a lot of ways. Or not, like, I don't know if that matters, but like that he does feel a certain pain that a lot of men maybe don't feel when it comes to seeing their loved one go through something, or their wife, or however he, might view her.
I definitely put Malachi in. He was in the original draft when I first wrote. He didn't have a name at that point. But he was definitely meant to be more of a character foil to Dr. Green, where you have this professional, cold, unfeeling male, and then new scene, caring husband who does feel the pain and the grief of it and everything. So I essentially wrote him as like a walking green flag. Like,
I mean, that's perfect.
Yeah, you weren't reading it wrong. Like, he does care. He cares about the narrator, the children. Yeah.
Well, I think when you have like a dystopian atmosphere too, like your brain kind of can wander to like the Handmaid's Tale side of things, where it's like there are people who seem like they mean well, you know what I mean? Because everything has a sort of like layer of dread over it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I can't. And I mean, I think that works, even if that wasn't necessarily your explicit intention. Implicitly, I think you still don't necessarily fully trust the men in this world. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not their fault. Like, people might say that about me
You
just
have that
because it's like, I've
experience.
seen, yeah. My
It's
women might be like,
really
I've
like
seen your
that, not all
kind.
men.
Like, right. Which I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, no, but I agree. And like, I think it's important to like, be like, there are some people who do care. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we try, we feel pain.
He was
You got
definitely
made fun of it in
influenced
high school for
by
feeling that
my.
much, empathy, but
He was definitely influenced by my husband because
Mhm.
he cared as well. He's very like in tune with his emotions and things,
Mhm.
most of them, and has
We
like
try.
most guys, most of them they try, but he's very caring and supportive, and he just feels a lot, and he's not afraid to like show it. So Malachi was definitely inspired by that, and some of the other male role models I've had in my life who
Mhm.
have been like, this is how I'm feeling. I'm going to tell you what's going on and things like that, who have been very open. And I think it's a good to go back to the like not trusting the men in the world there. I think it's a good idea no matter like what kind of story you're writing, whether it's a horror, dystopian, fiction, what have you, that each person is indeed their own person.
Mhm.
Like, not all the men are going to think the women are second class citizens. Not all the women are going to hate every single man. So, everybody has to have like their own point of view. And even if they're like tertiary characters, they are fleshed out, their own points of views and things like that.
Mhm. 100%. I mean, it's very hard to do that. Like, to give everyone their own like psychological profile,
And keep
basically,
track of it.
and keep track of it and be consistent. And yeah, just like it's a pain, but it's, to your point, it's very important.
Mhm.
Like, because people are their own beasts and they feel their own things. And on the inverse of that, people are allowed to mistrust them until they get to know them. Like, there is
Mhm.
dynamics between people are probably the hardest thing that I've had experience with writing, because it's like, humans are too complicated. It hurts my brain. I
So
can't keep track of all
complicated.
this, but it's like the most necessary thing because that's what makes it human.
Mhm.
Um, but that is a very delicate thing. So I thought that, so just to that point, I thought that came through very well in your piece, where I was like, I think I like this guy, but do I like all men in this? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
You're like, he
I got to
seems
keep him at a
okay.
distance. Maybe I'll hang out with him, have a beer with him, and then get to know him, type thing.
Right. And
But
then
I
he just
had
says
that sense of
something
him. So
weird, and you're like, no.
exactly, yeah, no, and that's happened before. Um, Great. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank
Yes.
you
I
so
had a good
much for
time.
joining. Good. Where can people find you and your work? Social, website,
Um,
bookstores, online? Where can we get you?
no, honestly, this is like my first, like, not big published, but like I've only previously been published in like school journals once.
Great.
But I do have a blog, the madhouseblog.weebly.com,
Love it.
which I do need to share the links onto for my small little fan base. It's mostly my
Yeah,
mom's
well, for
coworkers.
um, for the people listening and watching, it will be in the descriptions. Your links, to any socials or anything will be there. So just please click, and they'll find you. And hopefully you can find the time. I know you're a very busy person, to write something and more and put it out there. I would love to read more of your work, because we
Oh,
we
thank
we
you.
enjoyed what we've gotten so far.
Well, thank you. There is more on the Madhouse blog if you want to peruse that or
Amazing.
anything. So,
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Um, Great. All right. Well, in that case, I will let you go. And it was lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much.
all right, thank you for having me. You have a good day.
There you have it. That was my conversation with EJ and Ginger about her piece, Our Future, a short story that she wrote and if she finished and submitted for the Moxie Press Author Spotlight and was chosen. See, it's that easy. Fiction, nonfiction, it can be something new, a short story that you have in your back pocket that you're like, oh, this might be good. It could be an excerpt from a book you've already self-published. It could be an excerpt from a book you're planning to self-publish. But whatever you want, fiction, nonfiction, all that we ask is that you align with our values, which you can go find on TikTok specifically. We have 2 pinned videos. Watch both of them, and you'll get who we are if you haven't already pretty quickly from those videos. TikTok, Instagram, Threads, our newsletter. Those are the four most important things. Follow us, subscribe to us, to everything you can on all 4 of these, and share all 4 of these. I told EJ on the podcast, I don't want you to feel obligated to share things, but as an audience, I want you to feel obligated to share things because you are our vessel to more people. We give you the content, you like the content, you disseminate the content. So please, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, newsletter, the Fantastic 4 of Moxie Press social media, and our website. So Fantastic 5, the website is a great place to purchase our work and see the author spotlight. How could I forget? moxiepress.biz. Look us up. That's what I'm saying. Look us up. Enjoy us, love us, share us, spread the word. We're only trying to grow more and more, and we need your help to do so. That's it. I'm done. We're done for today. Stay tuned later this month. We have another author spotlight. It should be pretty exciting. We're very happy we're able to make it happen. So look out for that. I'll give you a little hint. It's because it's spooky season. So we hope you enjoy that. Otherwise, only one thing left to say. Lead with Moxie.